done. So sorry about that. The toolkit didn't take 2 years to develop. It was just well, just over I'd say 8 months, with also with the workshops we had, and actually we started developing properly in June. So it happened quite a bit quicker. But in preparations, it was really 2 years, because the first idea appeared at Force 11 at the conference, and there were some people there, among them Ross Pine of Springer Nature, and there the idea was born. I wasn't there, I didn't know what happened there, but then later on, about a year later, I was approached by Springer Nature, and from there we will take it further. So first, let me take you through the toolkit a little bit. I'll share my screen. Here we are. So you'll see this big orange area, and above that the menu bar. You'll see that this is a separate website with its own URL and its own homepage. So we created that because we felt, yeah, it's a separate resource, and we want to make it available. We don't want to hide it in our own website, make it available freely, but of course you can go to our site also, and from there it's very easy to get back to the toolkit. So first, I want to make you aware of the menu bar. So we have different general subjects that you can find there. For instance, about open access, about the open access books landscape, about the toolkit, and it's very easy to navigate to articles. There's an article there about what is open access and open access myth busting, articles about books landscape. So OA books versus OA journals, or the OA books policy landscape. And you can carry on here and find many more articles about the toolkit, about the story behind this toolkit, who is responsible, acknowledgements, and so forth. And then to the right, there is support and acknowledgements. Moving down a little bit, you'll see some buttons appearing, and they are buttons to navigate the toolkit. We actually have 3 main ways to do that. You can go to the frequently asked questions, you can go to keywords that serve as a kind of an index, and you can go to the life cycle, and the life cycle you can reach very easily by scrolling down. This is the sort of the central way we envisage researchers would like to navigate the space of open access books, because we thought from the perspective of the researcher and the research they are conducting, we broke that down into different stages and tried to relate to the different stages, well, the questions they could have about publishing, about open access, and about books. And so if you go here, you can sort of click at a certain stage, and then you'll find some articles appearing. Moving further down, we have some spotlights. These are highlights to different articles or things we'd like to disclose about the toolkit. So on the left, there is this article about common myths about open access, and you can go directly to that article. But of course, it's also you can also find it through the navigation buttons. And then here, what do users think of the toolkit? This is somebody who had an opportunity to go through the toolkit and give their view, sort of a review of the toolkit. And then further down, we have a few blog posts from OAPEN, and to the right, there are tweets. And of course, these tweets are mostly now about the launch, because we launched the toolkit yesterday. So you can scroll down here and find tweets. Among them, Ross Pine, who worked with us to develop the toolkit. So moving back up, the next thing to do is to go to an article. So for instance, let's look at this section, consider publishing options, and you'll see a whole range of articles appearing there. And then you can choose an article. So let's just choose this one here, and you'll see that it's called The Difference Between Open Access and Non-Open Access Books, and it has a certain well, template, and we use the same template for most articles. It has a title, a very short abstract, and then there's an article. The article is as short as we can make it. We want people to be able to really quickly get an impression of a certain topic. And if they'd like to learn more about the article, they can carry on down, and then below there is there are some links to further reading about the same subject, and there are also references that we use in the article itself, and you will also see some highlighted words here, keywords that link back to other articles or to keywords or to glossary items. And then here on the right-hand side, there are links back to the life cycle and also to keywords that were used. So if you go right to the bottom, you will also see the next article and previous article, and you can scroll to other articles that way. So what I'll do now is I'll look for an article through one of the other navigation options, and in this case I'll use keywords. And here what you see is a alphabetically organized list of keywords. There are about, I think it's about 30 or 40 keywords we have selected that appear in the different articles. So for instance, let's say license, you click on that and you'll find the different articles that use that word license as a keyword. And you can carry on linking using the links here to get to the article. So this is an article about contracting and copyright. Obviously, license is an element in the agreement. And again, you'll see a title, an abstract, a short article, and then acknowledgements, because we set it up in such a way that we make use of existing resources on the web as much as possible, and then refer to other sources and offer some links to further reading. There again, you can see the previous article and the next article, and you can go on to, let's say, peer review and quality control, and it has the same structure. There are over 30 articles in all. Another way to navigate, and that's the last one I'll show you, is using the glossary. So you can click on the glossary here in the top, and then again, a lot of different words, just as in keywords. And you'll find some of the same words here, but now if you click on license, you'll see a definition of the term. So it's a very quick, short way to sort of familiarize yourself with the terminology. And again, of course, we link on to the articles where the word is used and further explained. So going back to the glossary, I'd like to sort of show you and give you an impression of the number of terms we have, because this was, unlike the articles where we were able to use lots of existing sources, this was something we needed to compile ourselves, and we didn't really find very good sources to refer to with all these terms, and I think we put together a really interesting glossary of terms. So that's something really to take a look at as well. Okay, so moving back to the homepage, I think this is about, this should give you a quick impression of what we've done. And I suggest I leave it here and stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Eelco. Okay, so I think I'll start with the list of questions that I have for you. First of all, I think that it's a super useful tool, so congratulations on that. And I mean it. I think it's a very well done thing. Of course, I have some reservations, which I will talk to you about. So first of all, I would like to ask why? Why have you decided to develop this open access books toolkit? What were you hoping to achieve? Do you think that you were successful? Are you happy with the outcome, or is there anything that didn't work as well as you hoped?
Okay, so it's a bit early to say, to know if we were successful, and I'm not sure how it will work. We still need to find out. But yeah, why have we decided to develop the toolkit? The first thing I should say to clarify is that what really happened was that we were approached. We were approached by Springer Nature and the University of Glasgow if we'd like to take part in this project. And yeah, we immediately thought it would be great to take part, and it was a great idea, and it fitted well with our mission, which is basically to help the transition to open access books. And we think that one of the barriers is that authors don't really understand OA books. They still have lots of reservations about it, or there are misconceptions about open access to books. And so this is something that could help lower the barrier and take away one of the barriers to achieving this transition to OA. So we were happy to take part, and so that's about the way it happened. It wasn't our idea.
Okay, so building on that a little bit. So since you mentioned that you were actually approached by one of the biggest publishers out there. So my question is, were you at any point worried that engaging or involving one publisher into developing this toolkit so centrally that it might somehow compromise the objective nature of the tool that you were working on? And if so, what strategies did you use to address this issue? And do you think that you were successful?
So that's a good question, and we did think about this, and we talked about it. As I explained, we were approached by Springer Nature. I remember we first met actually in Copenhagen at the OASPA conference, and we sat around the table and talked about the toolkit. We felt this was really a great idea, and Springer Nature explained that they felt this wasn't something they should do themselves, or they should do under the Springer Nature label, because it was something that should be open and available to all, and developed from a neutral perspective. So this was their idea, and they wanted to help develop it and make sure it found a home where it could be hosted from a sort of a neutral perspective. So they were looking for a partner to perform that role. And So we immediately really agreed on that principle. And then later on, when we started developing the toolkit, we made sure that we involved many different types of stakeholders, many different types of publishers. We set up an editorial advisory board, which was as well very varied in all sorts of dimensions. And I haven't had a doubt ever during this development that we weren't trying to achieve exactly that.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, also a little bit building on your response here. So you said that there were different stakeholders involved in developing this tool. So this toolkit was actually developed under the oversight of Editorial Advisory Board. So can you tell me a little bit more about this board? How did you put it together, and what was the role of this board throughout the process?
Yeah, actually the role of the board changed as we developed it, because first of all it was set up as a traditional editorial advisory board. They were supposed to really oversee the content and oversee content development and especially take care of maintaining the toolkit in time, over time. So they would advise us on new sources, new developments, new content that could be added, and help us with finding good sources and more that kind of work. When we started developing, their role changed because we decided that we would want to develop the toolkit as a collaborative effort with volunteers. And we approached the editorial advisory board if they would want to help us write it. And so it became a collaborative effort. And most of the board members were actually, they volunteered to contribute, and they were either authors or buddies or both on various articles. And so the work became very different from what we started out thinking. We thought we had a sort of a governance structure set up, and then it turned into this group of people that actually collectively developed it. And so that was a change, and it was really very nice, actually. It was one of the most enjoyable things about developing the toolkit, to work with all these people. Now, when we set it up, we really consciously try to involve different stakeholders. So there are representatives from different kinds of publishers, from funders, from libraries. There are researchers from different institutions and different disciplines, and also research support. So there are people from research support department. And then also we try to get people from different parts of the world. So for instance, from Australia, from Africa, from the US, obviously from different countries in Europe. And so we set it up to make it as varied as possible, and to ensure that there was sort of a global perspective. And somebody came up with, as we had these meetings with the editorial advisory board, that we use the term neutral, but actually we're not neutral, because we're pro-OA, all of us, and what we want to do is lower the barriers to OA, but somebody called it stakeholder agnostic. So we used that term for a while. I don't really think it's a very pretty word, but we try to be stakeholder agnostic. Okay.
It sounds slightly like some kind of a sect, but it's fine, perhaps.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So you actually answered my next question, I must say. So because I was really curious who it was who was actually involved in writing all of these articles, but you pretty much answered my question here. But there's another thing that I'm interested in. So how did you decide which topics to involve? Which topics to talk about?
Yeah, so when we started working on the toolkit, that was, I think, probably early this year. it started with a number of workshops. So we had workshops at different libraries in Glasgow, in Oxford, and in Utrecht. And each time we invited researchers to come to a room to meet up and talk about their expectations around such a resource. So we consulted with them. We asked them about the topics. We asked them about what they what they would like to see, how such a resource should look, how it should work, so we collected all that information from these different meetings, and we then had a session with research consulting where they sort of took all that information and helped us build a concept for the toolkit. And so that's how we came on to our first list of articles or topics. And then yeah, the structure was really informed by the idea that we should work from the perspective of the researcher, and the idea that we could use the research life cycle. Mm-hmm. We started out with the idea of the publishing life cycle, and then we realized, well, that's not really good, because we should actually think about the research life cycle and make a connection with research. So that's how we did it.
Great. And for a more practical question now, how would you envision an author actually using this toolkit? At which point of the game? How would that work? So we have a hypothetical author. What happens then?
Yeah, so the way we looked at it is that you can have many different kinds of questions about open access books. And, you know, one person can have many different kinds of questions, and many different researchers will have a different approach to how they inform themselves. So really, you should cater for all these different needs. And it can be that somebody wants to know about a term, or let's say about licensing, you know, as I showed you just now, or about Creative Commons, or about how, or it could be, so that would be a need that you quickly want to inform yourself about something very specific. But you could also have a slightly more general question: where do I find an open access book publisher, or how should I choose an open access book publisher? Or you want to know something more about, let's say, Creative Commons, because you're going to reach an agreement with the publisher, and you want to know about that process and about what license to choose. And it can be that you're satisfied with a short article just explaining the process, or it can be that you really want to inform yourself a little bit more, and then you should be able to find a resource that provides more information. So we try to cater for all those different needs, and you can spend, you know, quite some time in the toolkit exploring everything, but you can also sort of dip in and out and find an answer to a question.
Great. And it all sounds quite promising, but my main question is, how would you make sure that authors actually use this tool? How will you promote this to authors, and how will you make sure that they engage with the tool? Because just because the tool is out there, it doesn't mean that they will use it, of course. So what's your plan for that?
Yeah, so that's really our challenge now, mm-hmm. that we created this, and now we want people to find it and to use it. So we start with you, with the Open Access Books Network.
I see. Okay.
We're happy to be able to talk about it with you, but also with other partners in that we work with. For instance, we're part of Opera, the research infrastructure for humanities and social sciences. We're a member of WASPA. We have 400 publishers that we host books for, or that are in the Director of Open Access Books that we can reach out to. And what we really hope is that we'll be able to interest libraries and research support departments to be aware of this toolkit, to use it, and to refer to this toolkit for their customers, which is of course the researchers and the students, because I think they have a key role here. So I hope this will also be a resource that they will use, and our job will also be to hopefully reach them. And that's where also the editorial advisory board will help us, because of course they can also promote it among themselves and among their own networks. So that's how we started out, reaching out, and yeah, we'll think of new ideas as we go along, I think.
Good, great. I guess that at least two minds who are here with us today will be thinking about it, Tom and Christina in particular. So good luck with this. Eelco, which part of this toolkit are you most proud of? And which part, if you had a chance, you would like to redo, perhaps?
So the thing I'm really most grateful of and also proud of is the way we did this together. You know, we did it with a large group of people. In all, there are about 70 people that were at some stage involved, and really many people contributed to the articles. And that was both a very, well, it was gratifying to be able to work with people, but it's also something we're proud of, that we, you know, we approached different people to become a member of the editorial advisory board. Everybody accepted. You know, everybody is busy, but they all accepted to join, and that was gratifying. But they also, almost all of them, contributed in some way to the contents, and I think that's really great. So I'd like to thank them once more. But the thing that I'd like to redo, I know now, because I thought about that yesterday, and it's not so much redoing as a job for the future, which is to work on making this resource more global. So I think we tried to create a very varied stakeholder group in the editorial advisory board, and we tried to use lots of different resources and sources from various areas and different types of stakeholders. But we might have done a better job at making this a global resource. So I think that's something that is really quite hard to do, and it probably will take some time, but we could have tried to demonstrate that that was our goal. So I think that's something, looking back, that we could have done better, I think.
Great. I think that we will come back to this issue of inclusiveness a little bit more, because I can see that Charles was frantically typing questions about it, okay. But we'll come back to it in a second. Okay, one of my last questions: what have you learned from this experience? What were the hardest part of this experience? What can others learn from this when creating their own OA Books related projects?
Well, as I said before, we would never have been able to do this by ourselves. And my message to everyone is, don't do it alone. Work with others. I think there is still so much work to do on the transition to open access for books, especially. It's really important that we join forces and work together to make that happen.
So that's a perfect segue to my last question. Thank you so much for this flow in this interview. So my last question was: it is mentioned in the toolkit that it's going to be updated regularly, and then that we can expect some new additions. So can you tell us a little bit more about what we can expect in terms of these additions, and if we, as the open access books community, if we can engage somehow?
Definitely, yeah. We hope to get suggestions and feedback from the community, from researchers, from users. We're really eager to know, what people think of it, and so we would love to hear back from users, and hopefully we'll get suggestions for more content. There are a few articles that we're still writing or developing. Some are announced on the website, so you can look them up. And one is about the differences between STM, science, technology, and medicine on the one hand, and humanities and social sciences on the other. And another article is about OA books and low and middle income countries. And that sort of points to another area where we have been thinking. The website is set up in such a way that it can be multilingual, but that's really a tough job. So we were thinking about, how can we do more in that area? And one way to do that would be to look at the situation around OA books in specific countries or regions. So you could think about OA books in Germany or France or the UK or the USA or Latin America. And I think that would be really valuable if we could add articles, because this obviously there is a really varied landscape, and things work quite differently. As I'm quite aware, having been involved in a knowledge exchange study on open access books in different countries in Europe, even within Europe, the differences are huge actually. And so, that's an area where we could do more. There are also some features we'd like to develop. So for instance, very simple would be a search function. We don't have it now, and it's quite expensive to do properly. So we would need some more funding to do that. Generally, we're happy to think about more content and to involve the editorial advisory board in developing that.
Okay, thank you so very much. Those were all of my questions. So this is the end of me grilling you. So now off to the audience. We have quite a few questions actually. I will start with the one coming from Eric. Eric, I will read it out loud, but of course, if you then want to engage, then just please do so. So Eric is asking, I'm looking for an open license on the toolkit. Is there one? I'd like to make the toolkit into an open access ebook, but it doesn't seem to have an open license. Eelco, what do you say?
I think it's open, and it should say it should say so somewhere. I think if you look probably at the footer, or in any case, every article has a reference to its open access license or to the permission received to reproduce content. And so we're quite clear about the content. At the level of the toolkit, we were thinking of creating a kind of an ebook, creating a different way to read it, so to speak, to browse through it. We haven't done that yet, but that's definitely one of the things we'd like to do.
Eric, does that satisfy you, or would you like to ask something else?
I think it's important to quote, eat your own dog food, and work with open licenses as a tool to engage a broader community, especially the international community. Would be interested in doing translations. I spent the morning editing submissions from Indonesia to my list of open access computing books, and apparently there's great enthusiasm for the Indonesian language programming books, and that's all facilitated by having an open license. So I would strongly suggest that license should be front and center on the website.
Yeah, I just now had a quick look, and probably it's just because I'm not aware of this, and somebody else might know. So for instance, Tom, and if he's there, he can answer, but I'm not sure where to look for it.
Yeah, I can briefly jump in. I think we did discuss this also with the group, but in a development phase, we didn't add it early on yet, but we can certainly add it more explicitly so that others can indeed also work with it. And it might help very much with the other point you mentioned, Eric, concerning translations, which is also one of the things we are very interested in. And that might also help on that process, that it will be much easier for others to make use of it without having to ask us or write us an email, for instance, which actually already happened this morning, whether they can make use of it in a certain way. Yeah.
Thank you, Tom, for touching on this issue of translations, because there is another question from Christian this time. And he asks, what about translations of the toolkit to other languages? But I think that you mean whether you have plans of translating this into other languages, if I understand the question correctly. So are you planning on having different language versions of the toolkit? Or
so yeah, we've been thinking about this, and we created the website so that it can be multilingual, which is something in itself. We have some experience with multilingual website through the Directive Open Access Books, which is bilingual. We have an English and a French version, and this website can do the same. But then thinking about what it actually entails to do that, that's a massive job which we would never do without a partner, you know, in another country or an institution, because you need to maintain that as well. You need to think about all the sources that were originally in English. What do? Do you look for other sources in the original language, or do you translate the articles and leave the sources? So there are lots of questions there. And all in all, I don't see that happening very quickly, but you know, we'd certainly be interested in exploring translations.
Okay, thank you, Eelco. And I think that now I will actually give the floor to Charles, because I do not feel capable of asking all the questions that you were typing as we were speaking. So Charles, over to you. Go for it.
Well, okay, thank you, Agatha. And I wanted first to say that I think this is a really, really good initiative. And secondly, that I know how incredibly hard it is to be inclusive in this environment. Eelco knows that, you know, we tried to organize, to initiate the open access ebook usage data trust with a meeting in New York. And just, you know, with the funding available and the capacity available, who to invite, who to not invite, it's an absolute nightmare, especially in this very global landscape. So I just wanted to contextualize with that, because I think this is a really good initiative. And I think OAPN and DOAB have become the closest we have to globally important infrastructure as the SCOS funding activity has demonstrated. So I'm really keen that all of us get together and support this from a global perspective. So, I mean, that really does come to that the question of, you know, it is very European skewed at the moment. I feel that particularly from the perspective of the USA at this point, but clearly this issue comes up around the world as well, and especially thinking about the activities of open access publishing in the global south, and you know the big activities of groups like Cielo and America and so on. So yeah, definitely your question, Agatha, about how to, and Eelco's commitment, you know, about how to make this more global is important. But I had a specific question about a very tricky area, I think, which is the bit which talks to authors about who they might go to as a publisher. And the issue of having a whitelist of publishers, you know, recommended publishers, is always so difficult. Unless there are really clear criteria by which they're included. So DOAB has really clear criteria. OASPA has clear criteria, but there is a membership fee. So there is an exclusionary aspect to that. But there is this list that it refers to, which is actually new to me, which is the one with the funder compliant publishers for certain European funders. And the criteria for being a funder compliant publisher are spelt out there, but I know that, for example, our press, University of Michigan Press, has received funding from the Austrian Science Fund, but we're not listed there. And when I was thinking, how do I add myself? I saw there was a link to an open online form, but it wasn't actually an online form. It was just to email Eelco. So I was wondering about the inclusion of that resource and how that resource can be made much more transparent as to why some publishers are on there but others aren't, and whether maybe we don't want that whitelist, because then you have to create all the different criteria for that. Maybe it's better just to refer to your own DOAB inclusion. So that was my specific question.
Okay, so yeah, so we created this list of compliant publishers because we wanted to promote the idea that publishers can do a job to become compliant from the perspective of OA policies from funders, and also push them a little bit to include, you know, green OA policies and that kind of thing, much in the same way that Sherpa Romeo has done that with publishers and green OA. And also to make it easy to contact these publishers with contact information, and to make sure that the information is up to date, and so give publishers an opportunity to think about their own compliancy. And it seemed like a good idea at the time. So we simply went ahead and did it, and we did that on the OAPEN website. It's not a really huge resource. It's not well, you know, it's you don't find it very easily, but we do plan to do more work on it and actually expand it, make publishers aware of it, and the starting point there is, what are the policies from funders? What are they asking of publishers? And particularly now here in Europe with Plan S, which will add requirements for books as well in the near future. There will be a discussion about requirements for publishers, and I think a list that simply looks at basic criteria to be compliant could be useful. I'm not sure if the way we did it is very helpful, so I'm happy to look at it, and actually we already are committed to look at it again in another project, and we will sort of try and create a sort of a new approach. I think that's what I can say about that list now. And we created a link from the toolkit, and that's something, I guess also for the editorial advisory board to look at more specifically. Yeah, good question though.
Yeah, I do think at the least it would be good to have that online form made live, so that any publisher can kind of submit themselves.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Charles. We have another question from Eric. It's about textbooks this time. So how can the Open Access Books Toolkit broaden to include the open textbook community?
Yeah, that's an easy question. It's logical. But the thing is that there are two huge worlds that are quite far apart in terms of open access books. And one is let's say the classic research monograph, and the other is textbooks or open educational resources. It works really quite differently. Often there are totally different publishers involved. It works differently in different areas in the US or in Europe. And both are quite large by themselves and have their own dynamic. And I don't really see how, from our perspective, from our commitment to the research monograph and the transition to open access for the monograph, we could actually build that bridge to include textbooks. And it might be good to think about textbooks and what we can do separately from what we've done along the same lines to create a sort of a resource. And I know there are quite a few resources actually that are really quite well established as well, specifically for textbooks, open textbooks.
Okay, I think that I see no more questions. unless someone would like to jump in. Eelco, I think you're free. That's it. There is no more grilling for today.
If I could just briefly jump in, Agatha, for
yes,
a minute or two.
Yes.
Because there was actually one question somewhere still buried somewhere from Charles in the chat about the European aspect.
Oh. Okay.
And also this open textbook is actually an interesting question on that part, because we did recently also have reached out a bit more also outside of Europe. And actually one of the examples was the open textbook network, which is now called the Open Educational Network, if I'm correct, to speak to them about what that meant, that change. And as Eelco also mentioned, there is different momentum in different places when it comes to textbooks and research monographs. So yeah, I think we are looking into that a bit more, but it's not very concrete yet how that then all works or fits together. But I guess, Eelco, if I'm wrong, you have to say so, but I guess that anyone who has ideas can, yeah, certainly get in touch to see what we can do.
Yeah, and I think the Directory of Open Access Books is still an interesting resource also from the perspective of open educational resources.
Okay, I think that Charles has another question.
Yeah, I had a question about about OARPN more generally. I noticed that you set the OA toolkit up as a separate sustainability option. So libraries would contribute separately to this. And I am talking to our library about how best to support OARPN in general. But how are you thinking about this aspect? So OARPN Foundation, DOAB, Open Access Toolkit, doesn't it sort of come as a package? Isn't it about being a kind of an infrastructure hub? Why are you separating off the OA Toolkit as a separate funding body?
Well, first of all, you know, we are not going to spend huge amounts of money on the toolkit. We don't want to burden the toolkit with a sustainability problem. So it should be something that is relatively lightweight, that works through the commitment from the community and especially, of course, the editorial advisory board, and that we can maintain without a huge cost. Now, if we succeed in interesting some institutions to help support it, we will develop it, you know, in certain areas. For instance, as I just mentioned, we'd like to add a search function, which would greatly increase the usability, I think. And we know that would cost us quite a bit of money. We don't want to spend that ourselves, so we would look for some support to do that. And if we could find more money, we would do more with the toolkit, specifically for the toolkit, separating it out from the larger question of sustaining infrastructure such as OAPN and DOAB. So they are separated out consciously. Yeah.
Okay, I do not see any other questions. So I think that would be it for today. I would also like to invite you next week. We have our second interview in the boOkmArks series, and this one will be hosted by Tom, and Tom will be talking to Ross Pine and Cameron Naylan about the newly published Springer Nature paper on that has to do with usage of open access books and how books are used in different regions of the world. So this is coming on Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken, but I'm sure that we're going to spam you with tweets about it, so you will definitely know when it is. And I think that now I would like to just shortly come back to the idea that was expressed by Eric very early in this call. And Eelco, just in case you missed it, you were walking us through the toolkit, and you mentioned OA Books menu bar, and some of us heard OA Books minibar. So I think that that's maybe it's the time that we, at least some of us, where it's 5 o'clock and not very early in the morning like Charles. So I would encourage you, bring your own book for the minibar and have fun. Have a good afternoon, and hopefully we'll see you again for the next conversation next week with Tom, Ross, and Cameron. Thank you again, Eelco, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Agatha. Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.